Hi, welcome back to Pain and Revival podcast. I hope everyone's having a great day. Gonna go ahead and set a disclaimer. Neither of us are licensed psychologists or anything, so any advice given is based only on experience or opinion. So there's that. Um, Today I
Okay.
have a special guest, Dr. Marilyn Shore. How are you?
I'm doing terrific.
That's great. Okay. So you want to go ahead and tell your story?
Sure. Let me introduce myself for somebody maybe that doesn't know who I am. My name is Marilyn Shore. I am a chiropractor in Delray Beach, Florida. I'm originally from New York, so I guess I'm still a New Yorker. My daughter lives there. I have one daughter. She lives in the city. She's an actor and bartender and does
She's
other things,
beautiful.
but she's awesome also. So I'm very blessed to have a great child like you are, and and I have a practice. I've been in practice for 37 years. I was a nurse before I was a chiropractor. Didn't really want to do that, but somehow it was the evolution in my journey toward becoming a chiropractor and a mom, and have the philosophies that I do have today. But you asked me if I had a trauma in my life. I don't think there's anybody in their life that doesn't have some kind of, if not a physical trauma, some kind of emotional trauma. And our interpretations of our traumas are very different. You know, what may be a trauma to somebody you may think is ridiculous.
Right.
And what may be a trauma to you, the other person would go, no big deal. And I think actually we make our, emotional traumas bigger to ourselves than what the outside sees about it, unless it's like super, super extreme. Meaning it's good to get it out in public, meaning speak about it, because when you hold it in, then you feel like everybody's judging you and has opinions of you. And really, honestly speaking, over the years, I've learned it's not that people don't care. It's just that they don't see it as big a deal as you see it.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, they're like, oh, I love you anyway. No biggie,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Meaning I get that you're suffering inside, but on the same time, I don't see you like that. And I see you as a great person that just has some stuff you have to deal with, like we all do.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that in my life. Like, cause I'm very, I'm like, my life sucks. And people are like, your life's great. Shut up.
But
Like,
really, and never say that again, Nevaeh.
right.
Like that's it. But you're whatever, 14. Are you 14 now?
13.
50, what?
I'm
13?
13.
Right. So whatever, you're 13 going on 40. And I just like, I'm always saying to you, just experience your childhood and your journey and being a teenager, because it's an evolution that we all go through, especially in our teenage years and in the early 20s. It's like tough. I'm not going to candy coat it. It's tough. You're coming into your own and figuring out what you are and who
I'm
you
just,
are.
right. I'm just barely into my teenage years and I already hate it. Like, I'm like, I want to go be 8 again. That's better.
Well, good luck. But it's just the way I had like a lot of miserable years as a teenager too. I wasn't, the so-called, cheerleader, blah, blah, popular type of girl. And, those are the people that awesome, oftentimes become the most successful people. So in the nerds and so on and so forth. But I also grew up, my teenage years were my so-called hippie years, so that was during the late 60s. I graduated from high school in 1971. I graduated a year early. So, by the time I was 15, it really kind of started 14 and 15. I didn't want to be being a cheerleader wasn't cool. Being a football player wasn't cool. Uh, it was peace and love and wearing bell bottoms and having, not fixing your hair up. By the time that was more that time period. But anyway, and even when I went to college, until maybe my sophomore year, I started changing out of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, getting back to my so-called trauma, which, you know, a distinct trauma that I had was my father passed when I was 8 years old. And what's a big thing where I lived in New York, and I grew up in Long Island, was, you know, in the summers, you know, everybody went to what we call sleepaway camp. And sleepaway camp was when you would go away for like 2 months. Bye-bye. I was 8 years old. So I was kind of young to go. But my mom sent my brother and I, and she came up in the middle of camp. I'm like not on so-called visiting day. And we were called to the office, the main office. And my mom was by herself. She wasn't with my dad. And she basically told me and my brother, who was at the same camp with me, that my dad had passed, and I didn't even know he was sick. I mean, it was just, I mean, maybe I did. I don't know. I just didn't pay attention. Like, who knew? But he had leukemia, and you have to understand, this was in the early 1960s, and people didn't talk about cancer. And it wasn't like today where like so many people have it.
Right.
Much more than back then, and people didn't talk about it. And I don't even think he knew. Like my mother and my uncles, his brothers, kept it from him because people didn't talk about like the big C word type of thing. And so he didn't even know that he had that. I think they told him he had some army disease or, you know, from being in the army.
Yeah.
Huh?
I'm just, you know, listening.
Well, it was, like I said, it was a different time. So when we got there and she told us, I'm sure I was in shock, but at the same time, I remember like, yeah, being stunned by it and my brother like crying. And I don't even know if I cried, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But I remember she brought us a care package that was filled with like cookie, you know, like potato chips and candy and like all this stuff I liked, whatever it was. And I remember taking the care package after she left because we stayed there. We didn't go home.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked camp. I was very athletic and I loved the whole atmosphere there. Some people don't like that. But I didn't go home. And I remember taking the stuff down to my bunk and going, oh my God, look what my mom got me. Like the whole thing never happened. You know what I mean? Like, well, that wasn't a real situation. And I remember just staying at camp, and I don't even remember how, like, if I thought about in the camp or it was like this reality to me, but I'm sure that there was a side of me that like I had no completion with it. You understand? Like there was no completion with it at all because I never knew that he passed. I never went to the funeral. And, you know, in the Jewish faith, you don't look at the body kind of thing. It's not, you don't do that. And the burial's really quick. You know, it happens and you get buried either in one of those things, you know, where the drawers peel out or under the ground. And so anyway, when I got home, I certainly don't remember, but I remember what I do remember is that, you know, if you have a picture of somebody and the family's in there, all of a sudden my dad wasn't in the picture anymore. You know, it was like I couldn't remember. Like when I look back, I still can't remember. I would have to ask people, what was my dad like? I mean, I had a couple of little memories, but it was kind of erased from me.
Yeah.
And so when people even ask me now, what was your dad like? And I go, honestly, I can only tell you what people tell me and an overall feeling that I got, but I barely can remember any situations that I was with him. You know, and 8 years old, it's not that young. You know, it's not like you're 3 or 4 years old. You should have memories of that then. And I didn't. And I remember I had this golden retriever that was lost and was gone for 3 months when I was in college, I think it was. That's another whole story to itself. But I remember seeing her in cars, you know, that didn't exist and stuff like that. And I remember going through that phase with my father where I would see him like, he's not really dead, you know, like
Right.
maybe he didn't like my mother and he just left and played dead.
Totally.
Thing. You know, like you see those on shows, on, you know, movies, and like people think they're gone, but they're never, not really gone. So I
Right.
had that whole, I know I went through a phase like that. But the thing about it was that just, I guess what my personality is, because we're all born with certain personalities. I believe that. Meaning somebody can have 2, 3, 4 kids, and one is shy, and one is outgoing, and one is positive, and one is negative. And my mother had a lot of like emotional and mental issues, which I didn't even know about it when I was younger. Like I knew later on in life that she had that. And my brother, I think, was very traumatized by the whole situation. He was 11 years old.
Yeah.
But I remember me being like, I was the youngest, I was only 8, and I was like the cheerleader, you know? So when you talk about being brave, sometimes in a situation, like if everybody's falling down the rabbit hole, somebody has to lift them up. And that was me. You know, I was always I still am, you know what I mean? And that, you know, I still am like that. But it's sort of the laws of nature that if you don't want to implode and die type of thing, somebody has to be the one that lifts everybody up. And so that was me, even though they would tell you now that was not true, even though my mom's passed. My brother would say no. But I was like, you know, oh, we'll be okay, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, in terms of when you ask about being brave, in certain situations, when you're faced with it, sometimes you just have to be, you have no other choice.
I totally understand. Like,
yeah, you have no other choice but to be brave. And otherwise, what happens to you? You just, you know, to me, it was like falling down the black hole, like the rabbit hole kind of situation. And that wasn't an option, right? So
I
it's not,
totally understand.
yeah.
Like with me in my situation, I lived with my mom. That was me. I had no choice. It was like you either do it or you die. Like
Right. Uh-huh.
So pick your poison. You know, it I agree. I mean, I think that being brave is you know, at some level it's just all about it. But like my great grandma, she died when I was 6. And I was like so close with her. And
Is this your mom, Katrine's mom?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was so incredibly close with her, and you know, I was neglected. So I thought that she was like the only person who ever loved me. And when she died, I kind of experienced some of the same things. It was like almost like, no, she didn't die. And so I haven't actually like really grieved until like now, because I kind of just was so young that I was like, no, I mean, she's definitely not dead. Like,
Right.
so
You
I
didn't
totally understand.
understand it.
I'm sorry, what?
You didn't understand it.
Right. Yeah.
There, that's better. Okay. I felt too close to it. Go ahead.
No, like
turn my iPad. Yeah.
you look great. But like, I think that that's so relatable. I didn't realize how much I feel like to you now, because it's kind of the same thing. And I think that maybe you were just so young, even though you were 8, which isn't all that young, but you know.
Sure. I don't know. I think it was the way it was presented to me, because they would, you know, back then, parents were always trying to protect their children. Now, obviously, parents are trying to protect their children now, but parents share so much more with their children now. You know, it's not like I can sit in a room with my daughter or be with her and tell her, she can tell me all about her life, like things I would never tell my mother. And I can tell her things about my life of things that like she would never have communication with me, or I wouldn't have communication with her. And I just think that's the evolution of society. And also social media, kids see so much stuff. I mean, when I was young, there was no social media. You know, there were times when I went to Europe, and I never spoke to my mother for 5 months. You know what I mean? So, there were a couple of postcards thrown in there, but it's not like today where parents have tracking devices of their kids to know exactly where they are. And all my friends have had that of their children, and I don't know if I don't think Paula did. Me and her never did. I never did that, but I know I still have friends who their kids are like 30 years old and they're still tracking them to see where they are because they have fear and they want to make sure they're okay and know where they are. And we didn't have that as much. We didn't have any of it actually back then. There were no cell phones. So but we also get to know each other better, and have better communication with each other.
Yeah. Do you think it's better now that we can track people? Like, do you prefer that or?
Well, I don't like the tracking part. That's not for me. But with every new thing, just like technology, there's good and bad. There's good and bad. There's great things about technology. There's horrible things about technology. And I can't say that I'd want to get rid of it, but there are consequences to it also that are awful. I mean, when I was a kid, there was a lot of different things, like I would go out. We lived in a suburb and the houses were close together. And you'd go out on a weekend or after school. And I was 5 years old and I'd be with all the kids on the block, down the block, and they just call you home at the end. It's not like you can't do that now at that age.
Right.
You just can't do that. Absolutely not.
Like even me now at my age, like I'm not allowed to like go down the street and hang out with my friends. Like that's not a thing.
Right. Unless you have a so-called play date.
Right.
Or sleepover date. And we used to have sleepovers too. I mean, but we never had play dates. Everybody just went out and played.
Right. Yeah.
Type of thing. It was a whole different way and you felt safe. You never had to worry about being, abused or well, no, except there was a lot of abuse that people didn't know about the abuse. So
yeah, I mean,
the forefront.
Right. That's like one of the things with technology is like it happened then, but you just didn't know because no one talked about it.
Oh, there was a lot of abuse, a lot. Yeah. Probably, I mean, maybe more because there weren't the rules and regulations that they had back then. And certain things were accepted that are not accepted nowadays either.
Yeah. I mean.
So anyway, just in terms of getting back to, being brave, that's what you have to do to be a chiropractor too, is you got to jump off the cliff and do things that you may be afraid of or is intimidating to you. And if you don't do it, you don't thrive. You just survive. And, I've been doing this a long time, so I'm not going to say I'm as, some people say I'm just as motivated. I'm motivated to take care of people, but I don't, do all the things that I used to do when I was first starting out practice. And by the way, I've started like 4 practices, like 3.5, so starting all over.
What's the half?
Well, when I first started, when I lived in San Francisco, I worked as an associate and I started my first practice in my apartment in the city because I didn't have any money. So I built it up enough until I have enough money so that I could open an office. So I call that my half practice. But I built that up through the way I built that one up is I had these dogs. Well, I had a dog at the time and I used to bring her to the dog park all the time. And that's how I built up my initial practice there, is by meeting people at the dog park. And then I opened a practice in San Francisco. And then when we moved, we opened a practice. This is when I was married with my husband in Virginia. And then when I moved again, I opened this practice here. And I'm not opening another one. That's it. I'm done. So, and I've been there, 21 years now. So it's amazing. I've been there that long. So,
I mean, yeah, like your whole story I didn't know half of the stuff, so I'm like, whoa. But like it's incredible, and it explains why you're so gritty. Like, I don't know if you know that, but like you're full of grit, and it's like you scare me.
I scare you?
Sometimes I'm like, whoa, she's scary, but you're great. But no,
I'm sure you're not the only one that thinks that way, though. Anyway, I'm just very upfront, I guess. I'm not. I don't hold back, I guess, that much. So,
but I love it. Like,
yeah.
I love it. Like, I know that if I were to go to you about something, that you're going to tell me the truth, and you're not going to be like sugarcoating it or anything. And so, like, I love that because I don't know.
Well, I hope though that you feel the love behind it, that it's not judgment or anything like that.
Yeah, I do.
And yeah, so anyway, so that's it.
That's all you got?
Well, unless there's something else you want to ask.
No. No, because you're great. And you did wonderful. And I'm so excited to see how many people this reaches. It's going to reach many people. It's relatable. This is raw and real. And I love it. So thank you for coming on today.
And you're awesome, Nevaeh. We love you and I love you. And this is amazing what you're doing. And keep going.
Thank you.
All right.
Make sure to tune in next Thursday at 6 a.m. and goodbye.